Entrepreneur Rap episode 002 with David Brickley and Brett Regan. How's it going, man?
Fantastic. How are you?
Good. So the first episode went pretty well. 27 downloads. How about the 27 people? You know, hopefully some people found us in the iTunes store, maybe some friends and family. If you're listening here on episode 2, we appreciate you as well.
We're on our way, David.
Got our first review on iTunes as well. 5 out of 5 stars by the great Slots and Knots.
Slots and Knots. I'm not sure what that reference is.
I don't know what that means either. But he says this podcast has everything you could want in a podcast. The perfect combination of insight, personality, intelligence, and pace. Highly recommend and look forward to more episodes.
This was not paid.
This
was
not
not
me,
one of
not
us.
You. But yeah, on the Entrepreneur Rap, we talk about relevant business news, what we're reading, tech tips, current business goals, what we learned this week as entrepreneurs. And we're going to start it off, as we always do each and every show, with the relevant business news that we want to cover.
Okay, so I'm going to start off with the most relevant piece of business news, in my opinion, is that GoPro just got kicked hard. They are not performing very well, and anytime I read something like this, I try and think of how I can take the story and apply it to what we are doing at STN.
And real quick, Mike, on the Facebook live stream, this is my story. Brett is the GoPro one.
I want GoPro, not cable.
Anyways,
talk back, Mike. Producer Mike.
Director Mike. You don't have one for him on Facebook Live. You only have my story.
Hey, that's okay.
All right.
So everybody knows what a GoPro looks like. It's a little tiny camera. You can put them underwater. So they have had a serious growth slump. And stock prices reflected that, and a lot of articles came out and basically were looking with perfect hindsight, saying GoPro has not made enough strides in between its Hero 4 and Hero 5, and the drone just isn't enough. And it was kind of funny because I've read a lot about GoPro. I follow it somewhat closely, and prior to the stock taking a dive in the earnings report, I don't recall too many people in the media saying that GoPro needed to do all these different things. It's like as soon as there's an earnings slump, everybody has perfect hindsight, and they go back and try and claim credit somehow.
Man, if we operated in every 3 months we were graded, it's very difficult to be in that bubble. However, I did read a comment on that exact story you're talking about, and someone made a good point. If you have a GoPro Hero 4, and you're just like an average consumer, you probably don't need to go out and get the 5 and eventually the 6. The camera hasn't made so much of an upgrade that you need to buy the new and greatest one every single time. So that's interesting for GoPro, because all the guys and surfers and skateboarders or whoever that need a GoPro probably already bought one in the last 2 or 3 years. So where do you move up where everybody needs to buy a new one? And
there's just additional technology that's not really there. They're already shooting in 4K. You can do some tremendous things with them. They've got a drone, but drones are already out there. But what I took from that is, sometimes a company has a life cycle, and GoPro has done tremendously well. If this was a private company, you would look at it and think, man, this is incredible. However, once you go public, you really are, starving at the pleasure of the shareholders, and everybody wants the sustained growth over time. Maybe they've literally sold an action camera to everybody who wants an action camera, which in terms of an action camera company, what an amazing feat.
Yeah, exactly.
Do they have to turn into a Facebook? Do they have to turn into some other investment type company in order to still make people happy? I don't know, because I'm not sure if they're going to be able to do it. I'm not sure if there's enough new technology that they'll be able to beat everybody else to the punch for. And as cell phones, they're just waterproof. They're waterproof, and they're just more convenient. So the article that I read kind of had a fun point about it too, is that most people's lives don't look that great on video. Like if you're skiing down a black diamond and you're on vacation somewhere, no one's going to give a shit about your GoPro on your chest, bumpy going down something that's not cool. If you're a professional surfer, and they've really pushed into action so much, and that's been their marketing tool, which has been amazing. But the one area I think if they could shift a little bit is to get those to be a little more utilitarian, like the go-to camera for somebody that needs something better than a cell phone but doesn't want to buy a nice video camera. So potentially some added functionality, less of a fisheye lens, something in between. But unless they make the shift out of strictly action sports, it's going to be difficult for them to grow.
Be interesting to see where they go. So for my business story, I wanted to talk about a study I read last week. 41% of satellite TV and cable customers plan to cut or scale back their service in the next year. They surveyed 1,000 customers. 41% said they were planning to cut back. compared to just 16% over a new term I just learned, over the top companies, which is things like Amazon, Prime Video, and as well as Netflix. So, we've been talking about this a lot, but how right now, if you're a TV executive and your 95% of your revenue is TV commercials, and you're seeing stats like this and people are continuing to cut the cord, I mean, what do you do? What are you thinking right now? And I think the goal would obviously to be go all in on streaming, but when the 95% of your revenue is all from TV-based linear commercials, you're not allowed to just take that immediate, A to B line to say, okay, let's go all the way and let's compete with Netflix now. So you start seeing that a little bit. Hulu just came out with a live streaming service where Disney, Fox, ESPN, ABC, they'll all be live streaming on Hulu. So that'll be interesting to see, if you have all those options as a consumer, why not just go to Hulu and have those 5 or 6 channels that you watch normally anyway? But the set-top box era is quickly dwindling, and I think TV companies that don't make that switch, much like Blockbuster didn't make the Netflix switch, are going to end up dead in 5 to 10 years.
Sure, I'm still curious and maybe a little confused on where everything's going to wind up, because if you take a television show that would normally be live on traditional television and you put it on Hulu and it's got commercials, is it that different from television? What's the difference between CBS just going to their app and watching those shows there?
I think the difference is the advertisers don't understand that same value yet, nor has I think all the data came out to show the same Nielsen rating type of value and how many homes am I hitting and what's the demographic. Eventually it'll get there, but I think until the advertisers say, oh yeah, a 30-second ad on Hulu is the exact same as prime time on NBC, then I think that's when everybody starts to switch. But I don't think the advertisers have caught up with the technology.
Right. I guess if the shift really is going from cable or a direct TV provider to something like Hulu or Netflix, they're not free. You're going to have to pay for them at some point, and eventually those business models won't survive at their current rate, so they will have to raise prices, and that makes sense. But the more you get, the more you should have to pay. But if we go from direct TV, where you have all these options and you can choose your channels and you can watch things live, to then paying a similar price to do that on Netflix, I'm not sure that feels that much more of like a live streaming or a different way of watching television. So I'm confused on what their end goal is. If they're trying to make live content, original content, they're behaving very much like a television network that just has their own streaming capabilities.
But you go where the intention is, and people won't have those bulky cable boxes in their living room connected to their 50-inch plasma anymore. At least that's what the studies and the stats are saying. So if it's more convenient to watch it on this or to Apple TV or find a way to stream it to your TV so you can watch it on a bigger screen.
But it's essentially cutting out the middleman. It's going to be
all the same product. Content is content. So whether it's a podcast on YouTube or a podcast on iTunes, it's the same discussion you and I are having right now, but it's
But that makes me more nervous if I'm an NBC, CBS, ESPN exec. That doesn't make me as nervous for them as it does for I'm a direct TV exec.
Oh, of course.
Because they still have the content, which is where the value is and what advertisers need. Direct TV has been the, conduit to which people are able to view the content. If you can cut out the middleman and everyone's like, screw it, everyone's got Wi-Fi, right? Cool. We don't need a direct TV.
Right.
We'll just give you all of this and here, buy it from us because we have the good content. Direct TV, satellite TV, all that kind of stuff, their days are numbered because they're just not that valuable anymore. It doesn't take their satellites to deliver that kind of stuff. You can do it over Wi-Fi.
Right.
And we're seeing that with, a lot of different instances. So if I'm a network exec, I definitely want to ensure that we're making a huge investment into digital and figuring out how to stream and getting your content to more people in more places. But I just don't think I'm that terrified of a Netflix, because really a Netflix is just a smaller network right now.
Who's not terrified of Netflix?
I mean, if you're NBC, or you just shaking in your boots?
NBC made $1.2 billion in ad sales in the Olympics. They can't just switch it to digital and get that same $1.2 billion right now. The advertisers aren't going to go there.
I agree.
So that's the issue, is they need to switch from a technology and from a consumer standpoint, but that $1.2 billion would turn into $350 million because all those Gillettes of the world aren't going to follow them to streaming because they don't believe in it yet.
Right, and the cord cutting community, I would assume, and I don't have numbers to back this up, it would be more people who are our age or younger in the 20s and 30s who are just like the millennial group. But they maybe just don't want to sign up for DirecTV, and I get it. The only reason I use DirecTV is because of football, and if that goes away, then I definitely am not using it.
And on the Facebook Live channel right now, we got a comment, do you have cable, are you canceling? And you and I have had the discussion forever. We do have cable just because of live sports and the ability to watch Red Zone and NFL and, NBA on TNT. But if it wasn't for live sports, there's nothing on live television that I watch or even DVR anymore.
Well, and, there's certain things that I like to watch. I like HGTV. Almost every episode, I'm not sure if it's Netflix or Hulu, but HGTV is all there. You can find it. Hulu and Netflix, there's enough television to where I can get my fill of television. I don't watch 50,000 different shows. So the only draw is live sports. So if it was totally up to me, I would have already cut the cord. But it was actually my wife that was saying, no, I definitely want to have football in the house, or else I would be a cord cutter.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Okay, so we're going to move into what did we learn this week as entrepreneurs, and David, start off.
Yeah, so, we both went to that conference on Thursday, I believe it was, the San Diego
American Marketing Association, I believe, like AMAs.
We went to the conference, and I think one thing I took away from it, I think, when you go to those conferences, I've always told people, I think 80% of it is kind of like, I knew that, or kind of BS in a way, but you always, in those conferences, I find myself always pulling one or two nuggets of information that help. And one thing that was drilled in during the conference, I think you and I learned a little bit, was if you can't track it, you can't measure it. And that seems like a very basic concept. But as we work with bigger clients, I really want to dive more into the big data portion of it, especially if a client is trying to use social to drive linear views. We don't have the data in our current box of deliverables to be able to say that we did that. So being able to, like you said, think bigger, work with the network, try to find the Nielsen contact, and understand if there's any type of correlation between social and TV, and if we can measure that on our side so we can prove that inherent value instead of hoping and crossing your fingers and hoping everything went well. So
sure. And luckily in our case, most of our clients do have access to a lot of data.
Just a matter of them giving it up.
Yep, and I think that we can just let them know that why we want it and how we'd want to use it and how it would benefit them.
We're all on the same team. We're not going to hurt you.
Right. But I do like the concept because independent of any of the other services that we provide, I really feel that if we were sitting in a room looking through all that data, we'd be able to come up with really some comprehensive insights that would be standalone value. So an effort to make all the other services that we already provide better, but at the same time have a standalone product.
And there's something, if I'm on Instagram and I notice that, the Oscars are on because I saw a behind-the-scenes photo, you can't really measure David Brickley looking at Instagram, oh, yeah, the Oscars are on, and flipping on my TV. You can't measure that one-to-one type of data the same way that you can measure somebody clicking from social, going to a landing page and entering in their email information. So you can't measure everything, but finding as much as you possibly can measure and see how social and Nielsen ratings work together. I think that's one thing you and I will focus on as we continue with bigger clients.
Yep. So what I learned this week, learned a lot, but I'll be a little vague on this one, but it's to always expect the unexpected. At this point now, when something big happens with a client, with an employee, with, an office, what have you, I've gotten to where they don't spike my emotions as high anymore. It doesn't seem like a seismic shift just because so many of these things have happened in the past. You get a new client, you lose a client, employee issues, whatever it may be. Now I'm kind of just feeling like that's the new normal. It's going to be like that until the end of the company.
Yeah, and you see, with these larger entrepreneurs and these very successful people, even someone like Tony Robbins, he just constantly, that's his job, is to put out fires.
Right.
24/7, there's always something going on. So I agree, there's been a few fires over the last 6 months or what have you with a bunch of different items, and now it's getting to the point where that's becoming the rule more so than the
right.
other.
And to add on that, I, whenever there's, in anything, in business, in life, when there's, a big change that occurs or something drastic, the first thing you do is freak out. And then once the freaking out is over, you sit down and you're like, okay, what's next? How do we plan for this? Now just the removing that spike in emotion part and getting right to, okay, that happened.
Yep.
What's next? It saves a lot of time, and it really just makes life a lot less stressful to just know that there's going to be things that you can't predict.
Yeah, and
things are going to change. Get used to it.
And one thing I've learned, even honestly over the last couple of months for me to that point, is find a way to turn in that negative energy, or if your mind's racing about something, trying to harness that negative energy and turn it into something positive, whether you read a book and educate yourself, or you go do something healthy and work out or get on the water or what have you. I think from a personal standpoint, instead of just letting your mind do tricks on you and bug you or get irritated, I personally found that if there's a way you can turn that, negative energy into something positive, it's been super helpful. So, all right, so let's go into what we're reading. Brett Regan.
David, you'll be very happy to know that I finished my other book that I talked about last week.
CAA book?
It was like 700 pages.
So what'd you do? Just like 50 pages a night, or how was your?
I'm not sure how it broke out. There was there was one day where I probably read like 200 plus pages.
I will say
took a chunk out.
I have to kind of highlight and go back and almost write cliff notes, but your comprehension of this book in particular, it feels like you were like reciting word for word. So I think some books do a good job of making you comprehend and put it into memory.
Right, and this is one of the longer books I've ever read. However, it was all interview style, so it didn't read like you had to go back and try and understand what the author meant about something. It was more just reading a script, a list of interviews, but it was really good. I recommend it to anybody. You do not have to be interested in agency life or Hollywood to get a lot out of it.
Well, let me ask you this. What's the number one thing, if you can pick your elevator pitch on the book, that you took away from it that was the most helpful for personal, for business, or what have you?
Man.
And it sounds like we should be getting paid for some of these endorsements. But.
Yeah. So Mike Ovitz was the guy, like the main guy out of the 5 that started that company, and he was really incredible at business, and everybody disliked him by the time he left. So it was the one takeaway, and maybe this was partially the way that the author wanted to kind of skew things, was, there's a way to be successful in business, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make a lot of friends. And, one of the other partners, they kind of put him as the, hero in every interview that talked directly about him. Everybody had nothing but positive things to say, but it wouldn't be CAA without
And that's
Mike.
what they said about Steve Jobs, right? Brilliant mind, but an asshole to work with. He was a jerk when he shouldn't have been a jerk, and he even admitted on his deathbed, like, I should have, had better relations with my family.
Now, I don't know if that's actually attributed to him. That was like
a meme?
That was circulating for a really long time.
And the movie they had about Steve Jobs, they kind of tried to act like towards the end he learned that he should have had a relationship with his daughter or whatever.
Well, I mean, if you know you're dying for a few years, it's pretty easy to try and turn the boat a little bit and make up some amends. But if he had died in a car accident instead of like learning he was diagnosed with cancer, then he would have been just that guy the whole time. So that was one thing I took away from it. But the other thing is to go back on what I wanted to do better on last week is thinking bigger. These guys were incredible in the way that they
why not is the
spread
motto.
out. They just thought we're really good at putting people together, and there was no cap in any of their brains, but Mike Ovitz especially, where he was essentially doing investment banking deals, partnering up foreign companies with studios in Los Angeles, making piles and piles of money. But another thing is he really tried to bring the whole company with, and that was something that I thought was really cool about him.
It's funny, this segment, what we're reading, I think we both did it to almost reverse engineer our ability to like read more and actually have more. And I think this weekend I was like, we got this segment coming up. I don't really have anything. I went and bought a book at the good old brick and mortar Barnes and Nobles, if you will, but Good to Great by Jim Collins. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I've got it. I'm in the middle of it.
You're in the middle of it too?
I kind of put it down and then started CAA.
Interesting. I had no idea you're in the middle of it. But essentially this book looked at over 1,400 companies looking for those that made substantial improvements over time, I think from like the 80s all the way through 2000. And they finally settled on 11, including like Fannie Mae, Gillette, Walgreens, and discovered the common traits that led those good to great companies to success. And about 2 chapters through, and if you've read a little bit, you've already kind of know the direction it's headed, but some really good insight to these CEOs that they call level 5 CEOs about finding ways to build out your management staff. And it wasn't layoffs, it wasn't new technology, it wasn't a big, all right, guys, we're going to redo our systems and workflows. It was just a matter of meticulously going through and building the company from the ground up, essentially. And so far, so good. I really enjoy it.
No, it's
some good stuff out of it.
It's cool. And what I like about the book is they'll put like a Walgreens next to, I can't remember what Eckerd's maybe is what they use.
A similar.
And they'll show like, hey, they were both kind of gaining at this same rate, and then all of a sudden one took off,
and
here were
both
the
had
reasons
the same
why.
ability to take off. So why did the other take off and the other, right? Wells Fargo and Bank of America, I think, were the two.
Yep. Yeah. And R.I.P. Wells Fargo. That train has sailed.
Yeah.
But Something pretty cool about that, though, the level 5 leadership, one element that they really pushed there was that this was not like a Steve Jobs type person. They did not look at someone who was just so charismatic where everything depended on them. They wanted it to be something where that person could lead them and leave, and those things were still in motion. The processes were still set up. So personally, I like that idea because I don't want to be the, person on the stage in a turtleneck to have to talk about a bunch of stuff and still have a company that can run independently.
Is there one genius where 100 people work for the genius, or is there a CEO from the top that's building an infrastructure where, like you mentioned, they can have a successor and it still have
right? And some of those guys too, I mean, were not the founders of the company. They would be brought on midway through. It was the the person who had the idea grew it to a certain amount.
I think 10 of the 11 were promoted within the company. And then their comparisons, like, the Bank of America of the world compared to Wells Fargo, they would have to go after 5 different times. They would go after high-powered CEOs that were famous in the industry, and each and every time it just was not working to get it done.
Very cool. And then real quick, I will say, so I finished CAA. I'm starting The Snowball, which is the biography of Warren Buffett.
Okay.
So I will hopefully
give
next
updates
week
on that next week.
Have a little bit of.
Let's move to our tech tip for this week's show.
Tech tip to me. I hope it's not the same one that you chose, but one login is the tech tip.
I did not choose
we have had a real struggle for multiple reasons in our company because everything that we use is on some sort of cloud-based platform. We've got more passwords than I could even probably think about. And anytime we bring in somebody temporarily or if somebody needs to do something quickly, we've got to go and change a password, which means we have to go to our special passwords report and update, and it can be really confusing. And then from a security standpoint, if anybody wanted to go rogue and quit, we've got some high-level clients. There are certain social feeds that we log into, so we want to minimize any exposure at all. So one login from a convenience factor and B, a security factor is really awesome. Essentially what it is, it's almost like Keychain on Mac or any of those others, but we can have our administrator here when someone new comes into the fold. We can say, hey, this person's on with one login, check a bunch of boxes, and when they get in, they don't have to use any passwords at all except to get into one login.
For instance, if your Facebook password is password1234, the employee never knows the exact password 1234. They just click a button and automatically logs them in.
You grant them back-end access to all the different apps that one login brings in, and they've done a pretty good job of developing relationships with almost everybody that we use. So when we hire a new employee, we don't give them any passwords really except their password to one login, and then they can just go to the different apps that are available.
Right, Director Mike, you like one login?
Director Mike is also our head of IT, amongst other things.
Head of Facebook Live and
advertising manager.
All right, so for my tech tip, you and I both do this. I don't think we've actually turned it into a tech tip, but using Facebook as an RSS feed, I looked it up. And
it's a hack, bro.
It's a hack. A life hack. I looked it up, and smartphone users check Facebook on average 14 times a day. So again, trying to reverse engineer yourself or trying to double down on what you're already doing. Let's all admit it. We're checking our Facebook probably more than we should. So if you could find a way to turn your Facebook into an RSS feed. What I mean by that is unfollow some of those, acquaintances and high school friends that you really don't care about.
Don't unfriend them. Be a nice guy. Just unfollow.
Don't unfriend. And then follow all the news and that you care about in the industry. So I follow like Adweek and Variety and Mashable. So every time I log on to Facebook, even if I'm kind of doing it from a dead brain situation where I'm just scrolling through, then you start seeing those articles, and it keeps you updated more so than if you had like a Google RSS feed or an email newsletter. Right. So you and I both have implemented that, and I think we are able to stay on top of the industry much faster than we would if we didn't implement that strategy.
Yeah, and to me, this speaks to the brilliance of Facebook, because they would have lost me a long time ago.
True.
I would not have gone on a regular basis, maybe once a week or twice a week, to check out what everybody's doing, because you can quickly get a sense of how everyone is. When it's a news feed for me,
you don't need a photo of your cousin's baby every 3 days.
And it's every 6 months. And it's just a better platform RSS feed than any other that exists
with
out
Facebook
there.
Articles and things like that.
Because sometimes I'll even go through some of the feeds that I have. I like looking through the comments and reading them if it's
comments. Is that what you're saying? You can yell it out.
Yeah, we can see your hands.
Oh, see my hands. All right, sorry.
Uh-oh.
I want to see that.
So I'll read through the comments on a lot of the different feeds. I'll look and see how many views there were, and to me, I can get a sense of how people are reacting to the different content. And
LinkedIn
it's also
does an okay job on that, but you can't really follow. I guess you can follow, but you're kind of at the mercy of what people are sharing on LinkedIn.
right.
As
And
well.
LinkedIn people tend to be more business focused, and some of those quotes, I gotta tell you.
I got it. But Twitter is just such a fire hose of information that even if you do follow Mashable and Ad Week, unfortunately, if you follow whoever J.R. Smith on Twitter and he decides to go on a Twitter rampage, it's going to just knock down all those news.
But I mean, for Facebook to have that to where initially it was all user generated content, and that led to that's a good sign.
Yeah.
That led to a ton of people using it, but they've built this huge media conglomerate based on other people's content, and you've got every single publisher in the industry, no one's trying to compete with Facebook for those views.
Right.
They will gladly and promote on the top of every article, share to Facebook, share to Twitter, share anywhere else.
And to your point, to end this conversation on Facebook and the stream, they've done a tremendous job of, like you said, you would have been gone a long time ago, but they know from a business owner standpoint, as someone that wants to stay on top of the news, they were able to click on that RSS feed, if you will, where news is really easy to digest. And I'll give Twitter a big high five as well for Twitter moments with the election and sports. They have different sections you keep up. The new iPhone 7 and the iOS that came out with, they have a news tab now where you can follow Inc.com, you could follow Newsweek and all those different things. So there's a lot easier way to stay on top of the news.
Awesome. All right, so this next section, we're going to talk about our current business goals. Dave?
Current business goals for this week, really all in on Facebook Live. I think Mike obviously knows I'm all in on Facebook Live, but really making that a well-oiled machine. I think we're getting close, but I want to continue and test, develop those systems and workflows for training. I think we're getting to a point where Mike knows the 24-step process to get Facebook Live going, but teaching someone like the great Randy Chandler how to do some of those things and making training videos and making process and workflow so that all goes well. So really, we've done that, I think, with the account side. We've done that with live coverage and some of our other clients. But I think with Facebook Live in particular, turning that into a nice workflow and system.
Cool. So for me, now that we are branching into several different areas and we understand our core businesses better, what I'd like to do is to really focus on how to separate out those departments and then allocate individual resources to each. So when we started, everything felt like it was all kind of part of the same department, all part of the same structure. And now that we are a few more years in, there are some really defined buckets of what we do and what those should fall under. So by separating those out and focusing in on each one independently, it'll really help to just determine, where our resources are best spent.
Well, it's funny, once you get towards like the 20 employee threshold, all of a sudden you need someone for admin, sales, payroll, HR. I think we've done a pretty good job in the last few months of trying to separate those buckets out, if you will.
Right.
Not so much from the services we provide, but the stuff that keeps the beast running. Who pays the electrical bill? Who stocks a refrigerator? Who's responsible for putting all the equipment away? Who's responsible for all the inventory? As you grow and bigger, those are the things that just weren't an issue when we had three people at our company.
Right. And even the way that in terms of sales and how we're doing those, we've got, creative, we've got live coverage,
On-site
we've
production.
got on-site live events, and then we've got traditional production. So all of those really are falling into different baskets that require different people, and we need to be able to know more about those. So that's one thing I'm looking forward to doing this week and this year.
All right, moving on to the next segment of the show, work-life balance. You were giving me shade last week for my non-work-life balance.
It was
balance.
Yours was a non-work-life
work
balance
balance,
answer. Yours was just balance.
But I will throw it to you first.
So it seems kind of elementary, but setting a bedtime. I do not do a good job of that, and it's the reason why I don't accomplish some of my goals in the morning. So I have convinced myself that I need to veg at night in order to go to bed. And by that, sometimes I'm just looking at my phone, just like turn my brain off. So if I've finished,
Well, that's the problem. They say it's so bad for you to look at a screen, laptop or phone before you go to bed because it messes up your circadian rhythm and it screws you up. But that's also so difficult to do. But I think if you try
it's training.
I know if you reverse engineer yourself to I'm going to read that CAA book, I'm going to read Good to Great before I go to bed. That's something that's paper and not a blue screen flashing at you.
Well, and to go on what you were talking about earlier with the audience cost of having to discuss a book, I really forced myself to finish the book last night. So I did that.
Did
and
it make
then
you tired though? Just if I'm like up
a little bit, but I also had a couple things for work I needed to do. So I finished the book, and then I did a little bit of work. And then I felt like, well, I've been doing all this stuff for work. Let me veg out for a little bit. And I wound up staying up after midnight. And then I was up at 6, and I
I'm
was
having
just
this
like, I
weird
should
thing
have
too
just
where
been up
I
earlier.
have to have white noise now to fall asleep. So I like listen to a podcast or a YouTube video, and I'll wake up like at 3 in the morning. It's still playing, or like the next episode's played. So that's something I almost need now, which is probably bad training philosophy.
But what I'd like to, my goal is to try and at 9 p.m. is when I start saying, okay, whatever.
If we make these goals, though, we have to continue on other podcasts.
That's what I say. The audience cost on this has been successful so far. I put it out there in the world, and I have to follow up. So at 9 p.m., I want to start saying, like, all right, it's time to start, doing the bedtime stuff of,
And I know with Tim Ferriss, you think he's a little bit too like eccentric in certain ways, but he does have like at 9 o'clock have my tablespoon of almond butter, do this, and I mean, has his salt bath.
I don't think I'm going to be taking blood samples.
But I mean, to a certain extent, like you said, train yourself to do step 1, 2, 3, and then your brain all of a sudden knows, oh, almond butter is the first step in this 3-step process for me to go to bed.
But you should never look up and go, oh my God, it's 11:15. Like you should know what time it is in the evenings, and a lot of times it'll get away from me.
My average is 1:45, 2 a.m. Which is,
but you also nap.
Yeah, you never nap.
But I like at 9 p.m. if I can start, figuring it out, brush the teeth, do whatever I got to do to start wrapping it up, and
routine.
Then at 10 be in bed, and then like have the lights off by 10:30. That's reasonable, and that's where I'd like to get because one of the other personal goals for me is to start exercising in the morning. Because
put it out in the world, man.
Hey, you got to get it out
for
there.
A second.
I was doing it for a little bit. I've done it a few occasions, but I'd like to get it into a routine. It helps me beat traffic if I'm on the road at 6. I can shower at the gym and then be at work early. So we're getting there.
All right. So for my work-life balance, every Monday I do an adult basketball league. I really do enjoy that. And I think for me, again, to try to put it on the world and hopefully make it happen is really sit down and write out like 10 to 20 things I'd like to accomplish in the next 3 to 6 months.
Personally?
From personal. So went out wakeboarding. Why am I saying wakeboarding?
Stand up paddleboarding.
Went paddleboarding on Saturday. It's really, the water was calm. It was really, really fun to do that. But just write down the hikes and water sports or the classes that. Why do you have like a smirk on your face?
I'm surprised you were out there on the water. I felt like you had a little bit of a healthy fear of water.
No, I've paddleboarded like 8 times now, and I'm like a seasoned pro, if you will. So no, it's really fun. So trying to just write those different things down that I do, so that way if there's like an open Saturday, it's not like, I guess I'll just work a little bit and just do some errands. It's like, oh yeah, I want to check off that one thing I've been meaning to do. So that's something I need to get better at.
Would you feel comfortable brainstorming just a couple more of these? You said paddleboarding. What are some other ones?
I love, and I've done like 3 times in the last year is, what's it called? Jet ski.
Okay,
that's one. Continue the paddleboard.
This is like an advertisement for San Diego.
Yeah,
right
I
here.
need to. That's the thing though. Like almost become a tourist in your own city because there's
amazing.
so many things to do, and people come. Usually, I'll experience these things when people come from San Francisco or my friends come from back east. Oh, let's go on this dope hike at Torrey Pines, or oh, let's go jet skiing. But when you're here alone, chilling, and you have time to spare, why don't you? It's $20 for a paddleboard for an hour, and it's really fun, and I enjoy it. So why not do that more often? So I want to hit you up on some different hikes. I know you've been on quite a few out there too with waterfalls.
Know all about them.
All right, moving into the media spotlight. Brett.
Okay, I'll kick this one off. So this was. To preface this, the election has been going on for way too long.
Tomorrow's
election day. But even in, the parodies, I'm sick of those. SNL has done some sort of political focused opening almost every single week. This was slightly different. They had kind of the traditional Alec Baldwin playing Trump and Kate McKinnon playing Hillary, going back and forth, and then they broke in the middle of it and basically just said like, hey, they broke character, and Alex said to Kate, I'm sick of arguing with you. It makes me feel icky. Don't you guys feel icky in the crowd? I think everyone's just like, Jesus, get it over with. So they ran out into the streets of New York and held hands and had a big kumbaya. But then they came back in the studio, and I don't know if this has happened on SNL before. I don't think so. They're usually pretty strict.
The Paris thing. Remember that?
The Paris thing, yes, you're right. So they broke character, and Kate essentially almost looked like she was getting a little bit emotional, but said, not going to tell you who to vote for, or I can't tell you who to vote for, but decide what type of world you want to live in. So we got a clip of that here that's worth watching.
And now it's time to get out there and vote. None of this will have mattered if you don't vote.
And we can't tell you who to vote for, but on Tuesday, we all get a chance to choose what kind of country we want to live in.
And live from New York, it's Saturday night!
So that was pretty interesting. That was I think SNL has a pretty big impact on politics. There's been a few studies about how Will Ferrell's portrayal of George W. Bush helped people see him in a better light, and that was really the character that people felt like they could, quote, have a beer with rather than actual Bush himself.
Right.
So to see that, I don't know how I feel. Part of me thinks like sometimes the media on a show, I want to watch that to get away from all that crap, and even if it's a parody of it.
You know they're going to do parodies of
yeah, but only because of the money. I feel like people tune in because of that, and it's just, for me, it's a little exhausting to even there just have to see like a parody of the debate when I've seen the debate everywhere else.
For the last 41 years, though, SNL has been a part of every election, and they do
Right.
parodies and they do the debate.
I agree. It was just a little exhausting, and then I don't know whether it's cool to like, because it didn't feel like they were. They didn't say who to vote for, but you certainly got the vibe of what they were after. So part of me thinks like, hey, you know, maybe that's an amazing thing that they're able to do with their platform. But part of me also is thinking like, God, this is what I want to watch TV to get away from.
I also read an interesting article about Mike Rowe, believe it or not, who does Dirty Jobs. He's actually a pretty intellectual dude. He wrote an article. I'll share it with you. We'll put it in the show notes as well.
And pretty politically like active.
Yeah, and what he said is like, all these celebrities say go out there and vote, and I agree with him in a certain standpoint. Like, I don't know I think you should if you don't know the topics or the president. Like, if all you know is what you watch on CNN for 7 minutes and that dictates who you're going to vote for as president, or what your dad told you or what your coworker said at the water cooler, I don't know if you should vote. Like,
do you agree with that?
I kind of do, because I don't want people just willy-nilly voting for a bunch of stuff that they don't know about, or propositions they haven't actually studied. So if you watched every debate, and I think someone like myself, I had to watch every single debate to actually know, like, all right, what side of the fence are they on? Even go to their website and look at what they're on, the different issues. But if you're just voting for somebody simply because your friends are and you've done no research at all, I think it's scary. And I think a lot of people voting just like vote is a scary proposition in my opinion.
Sure. I mean, that's been the case since the beginning of democracy, where people, you're going to be influenced one way or the other. So if you say like, oh, like I've seen all the debates, I've seen all this stuff, like, well, have you looked at the policy positions and the research papers behind it? At what level would you say that somebody's prepared to vote on certain issues as complex as foreign policy, trade policy, healthcare? Most of those topics from a policy level.
How about this? If you vote for Hillary Clinton, you need to know what she's done so far in politics.
I'm okay
she
with.
She was a New York senator. She was the former.
I'm okay with people looking.
Give me 5 bullet points on your candidate before you vote for him. That's all.
I'm okay with people saying I get a better vibe from this person than the other person. I'm totally fine with that. The one thing about voting that I do get a little annoyed by is that if you really don't want to vote for a purpose, to say none of these options and none of the alternative candidates speak to what I believe in, I feel that that's a pretty powerful political statement in itself.
So
and
other protest vote or just no vote?
No vote at all. But people say like, if you don't vote, then you don't have a right to.
Or that
which
vote goes to this candidate or that candidate. Yeah.
Right, but I think to not vote at all is just as powerful as a vote. So in other countries where there may have been a dictator in power for 25, 30 years, the non-vote is extremely powerful there, because everyone's like, oh, they won the election, but it was with 11% of the population voting. That's essentially everybody going like, these elections aren't fair. These elections don't represent who we're looking for. We're not going to vote at all because our votes don't count anyway. So I am a big believer
However,
in...
don't you always think you can look at two options and decide like at least which is the less of two evils? So like, it sucks to break an arm, it sucks to break a leg, but which one would you rather have? Like, probably the arm, so I can still run and walk and do the
Right, but those are shitty choices, and
that's what a lot of people are saying about this election.
Right, but the option not to vote. There are some countries that, I don't know if Australia is one of them, but there was somewhere that was trying to make it to where you have to vote for somebody. But that's like saying like, hey, do you want me to kick you in the nuts or the teeth? And you get to choose like, oh, it's my choice. What if I don't? No, I don't want you to kick me at all. So to not choose is a
to not
powerful
choose-
political choice. And keep in mind, if enough people didn't choose, then you would feel like, all right, 85% of people in the United States did not vote at all. These two-party candidates didn't represent us, and you would feel like, okay, there's a big movement behind this. This is bullshit. If 80% of us are choosing not to even vote. So I plan on voting because I think that I do want to have a
better
choice between
candidate,
these two. But I also don't look at someone who doesn't vote as somebody lazy, someone not doing their civic duty. I think that a non-vote is just as powerful as a vote.
Well, I guess we're pretty much saying the same thing. I personally think that if you do vote, you should be somewhat educated on what you're voting for and why you're voting for that person. And to your point, you think if you have done the research and you don't like either candidate, then a protest vote is okay as well. So my media spotlight is the first commercial that ran after the Chicago Cubs, after 108 years, won the World Series. Obviously, I think Nike would have made a commercial for the Cubs and probably for the Indians because it was Game 7. And what a game, by the way, for baseball to go into extra innings, a rain delay, a Game 7 of the World Series with two clubs that haven't won. I think the Indians haven't won for 70 years. Cubs haven't won for 108. So you're talking about like 180 years of history there.
And a huge boost for baseball.
Oh, yeah.
I would assume that people watching the beginning of the season next season is going to be much higher than it has been in previous years.
But this commercial, I think, was brilliantly done. There's not a lot of commercials that I think, and this is one of the best commercials I've ever seen, I'll be honest with you. And that, Mike, is the Cubs Nike commercial, which is pretty much saying goodbye someday. It's a little kid with a Cubs uniform playing in Chicago by himself on the diamond, and essentially he is going through the motions as if he's going to win the World Series. And I think every little boy, every little girl can relate to this a little bit. I was in the backyard as a little boy counting down the buzzer beater, 3, 2, 1, and playing the game in my head and acting like I was on the NBA Finals court and playing for the Lakers and things like that. So you understand that there's a bunch of kids in Chicago and all over the world that kind of ran this through their head. And the tagline of Goodbye Sunday was really powerful, and I know probably touched a lot of people.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the first ad I think that ran as soon as they went
The second one was
off
the
live.
Budweiser Harry Carey one.
Right. So I just wonder how much that cost.
Ooh.
I'd love to see the numbers behind it and then total production. Now that we're doing a little more, work in these spaces,
Well, it's
I look
Willie
at
Nelson's funny how time slips by. Was playing softly in the background, and in the background you can see the Chicago skyline. So the whole thing was really like Chicago centric.
Yeah, I just, looking at those, it's a perfect spot that costs a lot of money. It's really perfect placement. It's just a great fit, great for Nike. It's, I'm always curious to know, like, what was the brand value of doing a commercial like that? Because, like, yes, that boosted Nike in my opinion, but how much does that lead me to buy more Nikes? That's really hard to track.
It's tough to say. Like, if you were to pick taking LeBron James off the Nike roster or stopping commercials like that, which one would you choose?
So, what are the choices?
So you either have to take LeBron James off the Nike roster, he no longer supports Nike or wears Nikes, or you have to stop doing commercials like that. Because that's the brand awareness that makes Nike dope, and I think keeps Nike on front of mind. So when you go into Foot Locker, you're like, Nike,
right.
Nike's the shoe.
But I'm sure if you ask somebody that's high up enough in Nike, they would be able to tell you pretty quickly whether LeBron James in one game of the finals has the same brand value as a commercial like that.
What's great about those brand value commercials is they didn't say, use Nike 20 at checkout. They didn't say any of that then. It's just brand awareness.
Right.
With a Nike check mark, that's all you need, which is interesting. I think a lot of people would say, we can't measure this because people aren't using the checkout code or at checkout or what have you. But again, how many people watch this and say that's a dope commercial and then go into Foot Locker and then buy Kobe Bryant ADs, his most recent shoe.
Well, and that's a whole brand boost, and that's, the same thing with Super Bowl commercials is.
And if the same commercial was done by New Balance, would New Balance's brand awareness go up, and would more people buy New Balances this quarter? I don't know.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good spot. So unless it's something that's totally, completely out there into another stratosphere where it just doesn't make sense at all with the brand, then yeah, I don't think GoPro would be a good fit for it. But an apparel brand or a lifestyle brand, it's a good fit.
All right, so moving on to the Q&A and advice section of the show.
So I'm gonna kick it to you first because I
Are
don't.
you
We
stalling?
didn't get any questions.
Yeah,
So
so we got a question earlier in the show, and then man, David Furker on the Facebook Live
hey,
says,
deferred.
I fall asleep watching Netflix at like 1 or 2 in the morning. Every night. Hashtag Netflix after dark. I agree. People like that white noise. So for me, I actually went and did a talk at my former university, San Diego State. Randy was in the house for that one too. And a lot of the students were asking, how can I be a digital marketer? Or I want to be a broadcast journalist. How do I do that? Or I want to be a TV entertainment reporter. How do I do it? How do I become that? How do I set myself up for success? And the answer I gave them, I don't think a lot of people like hearing this, do it. Like, if you want to be a digital marketer, start digital marketing. If you want to be an entertainment reporter, get your phone and start doing entertainment reports every single day in your room. I mean, someone like Jenna Marbles, who now on YouTube makes millions and millions of dollars.
Katie Nolan.
Yeah, they started on YouTube and just did it. Katie Nolan wanted to be a sports broadcaster and wanted to talk about lifestyle stuff. So she started talking about sports and lifestyle stuff by herself in her bedroom, and that led to an FS1 Fox Sports national show.
An Emmy.
Yeah, and an Emmy, a daytime Emmy. So everybody's looking for that 3 ways I can grow or the golden rule to land my dream job. Honestly, I think it's a lot of BS. At the end of the day, everything I've been successful at, or my main advice would be, you have to do it. So if you want to become good at pull-ups, you got to do a bunch of pull-ups. And people don't want to hear that because they want the shortcut. But if you want to be an entertainment reporter and you want News to hire you, well, if you do 400 entertainment reports over the next year, I think you're going to put yourself in a really good position to say, I built this following, I got all these reps, I'm really good at this now, and I can automatically attribute that. And I think as business owners, if you're a designer, whether you've been a master's and you got 8 years of schooling or you're 18 years old, I'm basing you on your portfolio.
Right.
So no matter how you get to the end goal, it's all about getting reps and getting good enough where you have a portfolio, you have a demo reel where you're like, look, I'm good, and people will hire you.
Yep. So I'll follow up on that because I do like that advice a lot. We do gear this show towards entrepreneurs and people that think of themselves in that way, or maybe want to start something up. And I hear a lot of
You
people.
talk about the great Slots and Knots specifically, or?
Yeah, he's one of them. Slots and Knots. I'm not sure what he does, but this goes out to him. In general, people, when they think about a company and the startup company and entrepreneurs, they're thinking a lot of times about Silicon Valley because that's got the most eyeballs on it. And there's a lot of people out there that maybe think that you've really got to have this brand new idea. You've got to be a disruptor of a space and have a new concept, be an Uber or a Netflix or a Facebook or a Snapchat or something like that. And I totally disagree. One of the, there are a million companies that start up all the time that are doing the exact same thing as everybody else, and they just do it better. So
Uber did it first, but I think Lyft is doing okay.
Lyft is doing great. Facebook was not the first social platform. Yeah. They just had a better product. Yep. There was Friendster and Twitter, I believe, predated Facebook by some time. So get over the fact that, the only way to start your own business is to come up with an idea that no one has ever had before. There's only a few people that are going to be able to do that. And there's just not that many great ideas. There's so many people that put stuff out.
Make a service or product that people actually want to buy should be your number one goal. So.
If you want to start your own business and be an entrepreneur, you could say, hey, I'd like to compete with Papa John's at some point and start making pizza. And if you don't want to buy a restaurant to start and you've got a full-time job, you can start a mini catering business and find 1 or 2 companies that want to say, hey, cook your pizzas and bring them over, and we'll buy them from you.
Our friend Tad Dixon's wife is doing that. As she can, catering events and also doing meal prep for people. And I think it's called Kitchen Maids. But all of a sudden, you start getting 7 clients, 8 clients, 9 clients, 20 clients. Then you open up that brick and mortar, whatever the deal may be. But you have to start from somewhere to get that.
But yeah, you've got to be able to take the risk, and you don't have to go and get a bunch of money. You don't have to quit your job tomorrow. Yep. There's baby steps that you can take to actually put something out there and make a little bit of money, so that you can understand, whether something's profitable. But to go on what you said, just start immediately.
Did you just pull that advice out of your? Or did you actually write that down?
No, I just I had nothing listed for number 8.
There he is.
Because nice. I was hoping that there would be some Q&A, maybe some employees throwing some stuff down. Furker came through.
So let's move on to the quote of the week. If you have a quote of the week that you want to highlight.
I do have a quote of the week. I want to start with your quote of the week. I want to hear it.
Okay. My quote of the week is by the great Tony Robbins. If you want to look for obstacles, what's wrong is always available, but so is what's right. Personal and business, man. I mean, you can focus on the negatives all day long, but I think if you focus on what's going positive as well and be optimistic instead of pessimistic, you're always going to be in a better spot.
Yeah, and it's a lot more fun to be around people that, are like that. If you're around someone who's negative on a regular basis,
awful.
it sucks the wind out of you a little bit, and you get to a point where you don't want to hang around them.
Yeah.
So I really value that characteristics in other people. If something sucks, maybe they'll find something funny about it or a silver lining.
Be practical. If something sucks or you make a mistake, like it's okay to try to get better at it or dwell on it a little bit. But, at the end of the day, you can't just sit there and focus on all the negatives. Every day there's a negative that you can definitely focus on if you choose to.
Yep.
So that's my quote.
My quote of the week is from Reid Hoffman, who is the co-founder of LinkedIn. And this is good to follow up on David and I's quote. It says, "You jump off of a cliff and you assemble an airplane on the way down." And I really like that because we joke around here all the time that we've had to take some pretty big chances on saying yes to projects and then figuring out how to do it.
Yep.
And, we really, really, really have a huge concern to make sure that our clients are happy. We respect their time, their energy, their money. But at the same time, we know that we're really good at figuring things out. And because the space that we're in is relatively new, there's not another option that they could go to that would just totally, definitely be able to do it slam dunk way better than us. So I think we take big risks and we sign up for projects and figure it out. And so we assemble the airplane on the way down. And you've got to be able to be comfortable with doing that. And it can be a lot of fun. I think if you have the client's best interest in mind and it's a skill set that's not totally foreign to you, and you've got the work ethic, then it can be really exciting and everybody wins.
Well, there it is, Entrepreneur Rap episode 002. A little bit of housekeeping. Make sure to go to iTunes and give us a rating, 5 stars, if you like what we're doing here.
And
also, if you want to email us personally, we will take those emails, Q&A, or anything you guys want to talk about or hear about. David at STN.digital and Brett, BRETT, at STN.digital.
Thanks again to Slots and Knots. But yeah, all of
Big
you.
fan.
Questions, comments, concerns,
You could also
criticism.
follow us. Entrepreneur Rap is now on Facebook, The Entrepreneur Rap. We are ENT Rap on Twitter. And again, make sure to subscribe on iTunes so you can get all the new episodes every single week. Thanks to Mike and Randy, Brett Regan, of course. My name is David Brickley. Entrepreneur Rap episode 002.